And this is just where we left off. We felt like that we had to continue with this conversation about feedback because it was so enormously important. So we have been talking about giving feedback, and we had a great conversation about that. And I'm Dr. Brenda Murphy, an educational psychologist. And this is Carol Slatus, in case you weren't with us. And she is a school counselor with great depth of wisdom about many of the things that we need to make our families strong at home. So we had talked about who and when and a little bit about what to give feedback. And so there were two important points we want to make in this session. And the first I am going to share with us is about feedback, is how, or actually is not why and when should we give it. So Carol, if you would just interpret what we have here.
Yeah, well, we started off last time talking about how it sounds like we both really prefer the term feedback over criticism, yes. Even if you add the word constructive criticism to it, just saying that it's feedback on something that it kind of implies that there's growth to be had from it. And so it's implying that the person giving the feedback is coming from a place of caring. And so somehow you need to portray that to the child. And so sometimes if you ask your student or your child, and if you're the parent, is how are they feeling about the situation? They might say the person's picking on me, my teacher's picking on me, versus the person cares about me and is trying to help me. So it's important that you work on your child understanding what the point of the feedback is. So for me, I talk with a lot of students about when they get their report card. This is feedback on what's going well, and feedback on what are some areas that you just still need to grow on. It's not saying you're a bad person. It's not saying anything like that. It's just, here are some things. And also making sure your child realizes that everyone has that. Everyone has strengths and weaknesses. And a lot of times students will think about that someone is perfect. Like they see other people as having it all together. And I think that's really important that we help them realize that that's not the case. So in our last session, we talked a little bit about pointing out when you make mistakes. Sometimes they see their parents as someone who never makes any mistakes. And so it's important that you can point out, I made a mistake. It's okay. Here's how I'm going to fix it. Here's what I can do. So kind of modeling that for them.
That is so important. I agree with that completely, Carol. We have given that, and on the graphic about criticism and feedback, it talked about a fixed mindset and a growth mindset, and a lot of people understand that terminology there because that's kind of gotten into our common conversation for many people. Many people may not know where that comes from. That was work done by a woman named Carol Dweck, who is a researcher, and it's called Mindset. I believe that's the name of her book, Mindset. It's an easy read book. And so if parents see themselves, we all see ourselves in both growth and fixed mindsets. And when we understand those two concepts, it helps us to recognize that we may be the fixed mindset and how we can turn that into being a growth mindset. And so as we are giving this kind of feedback, it is a different way of looking at ourselves. So I know that some of our viewers may not know where that comes from, but you can read a lot more about it, and I would encourage anyone to, because that's a great conversation out there for all of us. So we want our children to become people who have a growth mindset. The more people that we have growth mindsets, I think in our society, we will have a fuller, more productive, more peace-loving society. So those are great points to make there for about the growth mindset and about the fixed mindset. So are there some other points that you would like to make about criticism versus positive feedback?
Well, I think the big thing is that, and it kind of speaks to the how, is that your child needs to be open to it. So if your child is constantly fighting against that, that's where that fixed mindset work could be really, really powerful. I know there's a good resource for the Big Life Journal. I don't know if you've heard about it, Dr. Murphy, but the Big Life Journal is something that you can do with your child, and kind of, it really just does work on the growth mindset. So that could be a really good resource. So if your child is constantly not open to that feedback, that's really something that you need to investigate why, right? And your modeling and support with that could be really, really helpful. So the big thing is knowing that your child is open to the feedback and finding the right time to give it. And so if you go to provide feedback and they're not open to it, think about yourself. If you're not open to the feedback and you're getting it, you're not going to take it, right? That's just normal. That's just life. Like, that's not a kid thing. That's a human thing, right? Yeah. So one of the things is, you don't want to come across like you're telling them what they need to do. You want them to be open to it, and for them to also have ownership of whatever it is that you're talking about. So again, it goes back to, what are we trying to do as parents? We're trying to prepare our children to be thinkers, to be problem solvers, to have a growth mindset. All of those big picture things are super important for raising healthy humans.
Yes. And so we're going to talk about how important is that mindset. So how importantly is the how? And we have a lot more information, just too small a type to put on the screen. But it does begin with, as you have pointed out, how to ask for permission and giving control, because this is the way that we need to learn to interact a lifetime for a lifetime. So how do we want to get into that, Carol? That is so vital.
Yeah, a lot of times, like when it comes to, I'm thinking about examples with my boys being home recently with doing their schoolwork from home. You're needing to take on and wear a different hat. Like, you're a parent, but now you're suddenly also the teacher, so it's different. So if you can see that your child is getting frustrated, again, you want them to be a part of it. So it could sound something like, I can see that you're frustrated. I have some information that could be helpful. Would you like some support?
Yes.
You see how that sounds really different from, you need to do this.
Oh, yeah. And I hear that all the time. And doesn't that just kind of great? You need. And in many cases, having a you statement is really something that we can check ourselves on. I've learned over time that that's not the best way to get engagement with people, that when you say you need rather than.
Exactly. And you need to think about it. This is a time of heightened emotion for them.
Yes.
Right. So you want to de-escalate that heightened emotion and just be like, I'm here to provide support for you, when you're ready for that. And, maybe encourage them to take a little break and then come back to it. And you could say, have you considered it in a different way? Are you open to us brainstorming some ideas together? So that they're feeling like they're a part of it. It's not you telling them what to do, because that doesn't really go over well. So it's really important, the small choices of words that you use. And if you're starting off with you, kind of, how could I rephrase it to basically say the same thing, but in a way that is more including them in the process, and also allowing permission, that you want them to be receiving this feedback when they're open to the feedback.
Yeah, and I do think that the way we approach it, I think just personally, that when someone says, this is the way you should do it, I'm going to resist that. I think that's human nature. And just because our children are little and don't have a whole lot of experience in life, somehow we think that that's a different emotional response for them. And it really is not. And sometimes a different approach is going to get participation and engagement rather than pushing people away. So when we give the inappropriate kind of feedback, not only is it, I believe, stopping the moment, but also not building good relationships. And so that's one of the things, our purposes at Strong at Home, is how do we develop strong relationships at home and, of course, in the general population. So how you give that feedback is so vital.
they're looking to you. They're looking to you because you have more life experience, right?
Yeah.
But you don't want to make it seem like you want to make sure you understand their life experience, because it's different. It might be slightly different than yours, but the experience that you've had can be so valuable to share with them. So again, it kind of goes back to that ownership and stuff. So you could say something like, here's something that worked best for me. It may also be helpful to you, but adding the word in "it may" kind of gives them ownership of, hey, this is something I can consider from your experience that might be helpful for me, but it's giving them the power and the choice to use it or to not to.
Carol, in your experience, have you found that even with some of the children that are experiencing the most extreme behavioral issues, that when they are approached through this type of feedback interaction, that they tend to have a reduced level of experience or of behavior, so that rather than it becoming a contest or sort of the butting of the heads, that it kind of de-escalates what could potentially be a more combative situation?
Oh, for sure. For sure. I think, and it kind of goes back to that timing piece, that you need to be willing to let go of when you want to give the feedback versus when it's going to be best received. And also, it also goes back to, we had done this in the previous session as well, as to who is giving that feedback. Sometimes it may not necessarily be you. It might need to be a joint effort, especially when it's talking about something that's a really big problem that someone's having.
Yeah, and sometimes if in the feedback it's a really difficult situation, something that you mentioned in another one of our sessions was just the close personal contact. And especially as children are going through adolescence and the teen years, where they're really seeking out who's going to give me the kind of feedback, support that I need, that as parents that we can still rely on some of the nonverbal kind of feedback that we all like.
Yeah, because you need to show your children that you love them unconditionally. I think that's just really, really important. I'm gonna cry. It's like it's just so important that that we show them unconditional love, that they understand that we will love them no matter what. I just spoke with my children about this morning and talking about God's love, but our love as a parent is the same, in the sense that we may not necessarily always like things that they're doing, but they are still loved through it all. So it's important that we relay that.
Oh, Carol, that is so powerful. And yes, I do believe that it is in those situations when our children have done something that they wish they hadn't done, and that rather than heaping the coals on their heads, we offer them this warm embrace and a cup of love and kindness and maybe cool water, if you will, to calm the situation. I think about a friend of mine whose son, when he was in his teens, did something that was illegal. A wonderful young man, and had one of these wild teen ideas, and ended up in jail and in another city, which meant that the parents had to go and travel and go and see the precious son of theirs. And when the father got the young man out of the prison, rather than saying anything to him, the little young man didn't know what to do, the father just opened his arms and let him come, and just this deep embrace that was so affirming. And that was the beginning of a much different direction for him. And he recognized that making the kinds of decisions he had made were not the ones that he would want to make or his family, but that father's love supported him even in that moment of great difficulty.
Yes.
So your words of unconditional love ring so true. And not that we accept what was wrong, and we have to,
Mm-hmm.
like we did on another one, there are results to some of our decisions.
Yes.
But
and that point that we brought up in another session too is that, you know, what we do with our feelings is sometimes right or wrong, but anything that's a misstep in any sort of way is really an opportunity to grow.
yes, yes, yes. And that will be our final word on giving feedback. And it's a great word to have, because that is really where we want to be. So the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance unto you and give you peace. Carol, thank you so much.
You're
We'll
welcome.
see you soon. Bye-bye.